Шановні гості, якщо
Ladies and gentlemen, if you need simultaneous translations,
interpretation, please take it in the end of the hall. Продовжуємо роботу.
Let us continue our working day, and now we are going to discuss the relationship of the government and civil society, and now the floor is given to the moderator to present our guests. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Oleksandra. I'm the moderator of today's discussion, and what we're going to discuss, we are going to discuss the new drafts on reporting, presidential drafts of documents on alternative reporting, and we're going to discuss whether we need those alternative reporting, whether we need that in the format which was discussed, and whether we need the same practice for the civil activists, and whether such documents should be discussed and adopted in the closed commission. And we'll start with the statement of the EU mission representative, Mr. Henrik Larsen. So you, Pan Henrik Larsen, прошу до слова. Excuse me? Please excuse us for this small delay. While Mr. Larsen is getting ready, I would like to thank the participants because they prepared, they reviewed the reporting of the civil society organization and NGO, and the results shows whether we need the alternative reporting. And you also have the fact sheet of the civil rights, and that review illustrates the need for alternative reporting. So the floor is given to Mr. Henrik Larsen, the representative of the political department of the EU mission. So the floor is yours.
Good morning to everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to talk here today about the package of bills that is supposed to remove the obligation for anti-corruption NGOs to submit e-declarations in Ukraine, one of the big debacles of the summer and spring. I would give some introductory remarks about the context, and then talk a little bit about the specifics, the specific concerns from EU perspective about the draft laws. So about the context first. It goes almost without saying that the obligation for anti-corruption NGOs to submit declarations similar to public officials is not in line with European standards, as only public officials that are in trusted positions to take authoritative decisions on behalf of the state should be subject to such an obligation. I believe that there can be no doubt about that. Of course, we know with satisfaction that there is now political willingness to remedy the situation in Ukraine, possibly from presidential office. Unfortunately, RADA, as we know, could not take action on it last week, the last session before the summer recess. That's regrettable on one hand, but on the other hand, time will also now allow civil society and the international community to comment on the laws. So the positive thing is that there will be hopefully room for further improvement of the package of bills, and that's something that also Poroshenko indicated during the Ukraine-EU summit last week. Two specific points about the process. Of course, from EU perspective, civil society, it's desirable that civil society is consulted in the process and is able to express concerns about something that concerns themselves. From your perspective also, there is an interest in the view of civil society on whether the new reporting obligations would be manageable in light of their limited, some of them limited resources. Hopefully that's something that can be dwelled upon over the summer. I will prefer not to go into a deeper or more detailed discussion about the package of bills, but and the negative impact they may have on civil society in Ukraine. But nevertheless, I will outline some general concerns that the EU sees in the current package of bills about the substance. That maybe can be used for further discussion later. And the main concern is referred to as about private entrepreneurs, namely the extra obligation for so-called private entrepreneurs or natural persons who receive incomes from international donors. The current package of bills obliges natural persons that receive such income from international donors to submit information in a special annex to their tax declarations. And moreover, this tax declaration will be available to the public. And that seems to be a problem of inconsistency here, because it's important to note that legal entities, such as private companies in Ukraine, that also receive like a similar income, are not subject to the same obligation. So it seems that there are no objective reason why natural persons should be treated differently from such legal entities as private companies that do not have such obligation. There should be equality in principle. And related to that, we can say the deterring effect on private entrepreneurs, like that international donors rely on necessarily for projects in Ukraine. It's the view that would simply make it more difficult with introducing further reporting obligations to help Ukraine. It's an ambitious effort when private entrepreneurs are subject to additional burdens. Well, that would be the main concern. I'll mention two other related similar concerns, namely the first one being the threshold for when civil society organizations have to declare their incomes. It remains rather low, and especially what concerns small NGOs, it might overburden these organizations. And the third concern, or the doesn't relate to NGOs as such, but I will nevertheless mention it. Namely the criminal liability for NEPC. It's also in the package of bills in how its staff handles confidential information, and we think especially about e-declarations in this context, of course. However, there seems to be no reason why there would be a special clause in the package of bills that would cover specifically NEPC. Why should it be covered by not by general legislation or generic legislation on data protection? Indeed, introducing having such a special clause might expose NEPC staff to unnecessary investigation and interfering with the functioning of the agency. Yeah, so this was meant as an introductory remark, the EU perspective on the draft laws of bills, and for further discussion in the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Larsen. The format does not stipulate the discussion. However, the discussion is expected during two panels. First panel will consist of the representatives of the civil society. They are going to assess the new draft laws, the new draft bills, because they will influence the civil society activities. And secondly, the second panel will cover donors' activity. The representatives are going to discuss financial reporting requirements, whether they comply with international standards. And there is a request, if simultaneous translation is provided, please speak slower to enable our interpreters to translate what is said. So please, Ms. Natalia Ligachova, Oleksandr Lemenov, Olga Aivazovska, Tamila and Tamila Tasheva. Please, you're welcome to sit here. Ms. Natalia Ligachova, the head of social organization Detector Media, are welcome to make the first presentation. Please talk about your opinion on risks or non-risks of those bills. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. As far as I know, all NGOs came to the agreement that those bills, well, on one hand, it's good that those bills should have been submitted instead of those covering only anti-corruption organizations. On the other hand, we see that the new bills are introducing chaos in the all NGOs activities, because those norms against anti-corruption NGOs were not cancelled. So we see the problems, priorities, the following priorities. The norms were not cancelled, although the presidential administration said that they were working together with representatives of the civil societies. It was not so. And the meeting before, on the eve of introduction of the bills to the parliament, the situation was absolutely strange. The representatives of the civil society were informed an hour before the introduction of the bills to the parliament. It's a wrong way to do so. Those documents contain a lot of provisions which put the NGOs working with international donors under uneven situation. They are limited, so there is an uneven field based on the sources of the income. If the income of the international donors community, the rights are limited compared to the domestic sources, for example, from private business. And then the threshold of the 300 of minimal wages, the reporting, so some of them smaller than that thresholds can operate without additional reporting, and those which are bigger can work transparently only if they submit special financial reporting. That creates uneven ground. Either rules are the same either for all, or it should be this or that. Additional reporting is given this or for everyone. And we all know that the majority of the donors' assistance goes to governmental agencies, but those bills do not stipulate any special reporting for the governmental agencies which are supported by donors' community. So the opponents of the government agencies, in other words, NGOs, are going to be controlled very strictly. On the other hand, they are not going to control themselves. And I absolutely agree with the representative of the international donors community that the situation with private entrepreneurs cannot be accepted. After the meeting on Friday, the most outrageous norm was removed when all the private entrepreneurs should have reported. So it turned out, so the submitted bill contains a norm of private entrepreneurs submitting the donors' support, the donors' funding should report with on themselves. It's strange because we know that all media work with private entrepreneurs, so those FOPs should not report specially, but those private entrepreneurs which works with NGOs and private donors should submit a special reporting. It's also the violation as well. So there are a lot of other discrimination norms. I'm not going to discuss that in particular, but what I want the aim of our today's meeting is to announce that the preparation of such bills should be public. It should be performed together by the government and civil society, and whether it is going to be a wide platform, multi-organizational platform, or it is going to be a task force encompassing the representatives of the civil society's organization, that's to be decided later. But there should be a public discussion involving all the civil society and NGOs representatives, and either the current bills should be amended heavily, or the new documents should be prepared and presented. And what Detector Media review showed that many norms contradicts the EU traditional norms. First of all, it's on privacy, norms on privacy, and secondly, the discrimination practices. Our government should demonstrate that they comply and follow the EU norms. If we are moving towards associated membership or membership in wider European community, that needs to be amended. Yes, as far as I remember, 78 or 77% of all the donors' support is given to the governmental agencies, and only 13% goes to the civil society. So the governmental agency does not work. I would like to invite the representative of OPORA society. A lot of lawyers working there, and we're, as far as I know, a lot of working there. Well, you know, it does not work that. We have a long track working, and we would like to involve the we usually contract the people or entities who will work rather than hire the private entrepreneurs, and it's not that important, but there are a lot of much heavier programs linking without if not linked, then the NGO status is cancelled, and the taxes which were paid on the special regime should be compensated, and the period is 3 years long. As far as we know, our tax authorities, it is next to impossible to prove to tax inspectors that you purchased all the organizational things necessary for your activities, so the cancellation of NGO status is mentioned, but there is no procedure of restoring of NGO status. So if tax authorities state that you are guilty of not paying taxes, you are deprived of the NGO's status, and serious fines are assigned. it even breaks the thresholds of the types of the special financial reporting. The NGO stops its operation, and the leadership is subject to criminal liability. And I think that it is the worst problem. It's the worst problem with any Ukrainian legislation, especially tax code. The problem existed, but it was not linked to the type of the activities earlier. Therefore, I would like to discuss details less, but I would like to discuss more of the global threats of these initiatives. And I don't want to support the wording used in information campaigns against NGOs or against people who should e-report on anti-corruption activities. But I'd rather discuss global threats. I'm absolutely sure that the issue of the reporting shall not cover tools against anti-civil society activities. None of the NGOs are going to support a PAC rather than transparent activities. Therefore, I'm absolutely for the reporting. The question of the format is important. If NGO made a mistake and has no right to fix the mistake or to report once again, means that they are pleaded guilty before that. And it means that in 2018, which is going to be very difficult for Ukraine in all aspects, it's because it's the year of elections. This instrument can be used against the civil society. The authors of the bills, and I don't mean the presidents only, but all the group which developed this bill, they refer to the EU experience and that they obtained this experience from multi-level consultations. I'm very much interested in paragraph 63. So I know that current practice is to cut out of the context different provisions. First of all, it's the confidence of the donor's activity and the protection of the confidence and protection of the confidence donors and NGOs' activities. If NGO has no right to keep confidence on reporting, which we witness now, because the tax authorities have all the information requested on revenues, on transactions and all that, but making those information public and liability for organization for not publicizing such information is extra. I also mention the obligation of the private entrepreneurs to report on that, and the reporting which is going to be published on the national site. However, nobody is responsible for uploading this information. Neither NGO nor private entrepreneurs cannot upload this information. And then the liability of the NGOs. We know our legal framework. It is next to impossible to prove that it's your site, especially if you use servers or providers outside Ukraine. Only physical person, natural person, has the right to register ownership rights to the domain name. So if the you want the reporting to be proved on your side, it can be easily done. So I know them. I would like to draw your attention to the norms which were on the previous bills. They were awful, especially on the reporting of the recipients, and in fact all the NGOs are recipients if they work with donors. Beneficiaries, well, only donors are left. However, it does not minimize their current risks. And two last items. We must have the reporting, however, it shall be adequate. And secondly, if we have the special reporting for private entrepreneurs only, the political implications are as under scrutiny. Natural person, legal entities are not obliged to report specially. Only private entrepreneurs must do that. Just one remark. The authors of the bill pretend that the NGO status, non-for-profit, is the benefit, but it's not benefit. NGO is not supposed for commercial activities, for making profit. That is why it should not report on profit. However, we have to report. So if, for example, the tax authorities would decide to cancel your NGO status, you would have to pay 250,000 hryvnias as fines. Well, if you are NGOs, you'd better think first, where can you get those money? So let's move on. The floor is given to Mr. Lemenov, anti-corruption group. It's like a joke. When they started taking us as anti-corruptions, we were silent, and then when they wanted me, nobody could help us. So, thanks to the previous speakers for the details, how we are doing, anti-corruption corruption organizations are doing. So we started our special reporting because we shall do that by law. As we agreed, Dvoretska, and we have to comply. So I would like to mention a couple of things which are out of the focus. Let's remember how the people's deputies, member of parliament, created the special regime, discriminating regime for financial supporting. And due to that, all anti-corruption shall report in the regime of the public servant. Which is strange because we pay taxes and their wages are paid out of our taxes. And those document bill was supported by all the factions of the parliament. It was really a consolidating driver. It was like a revenge on anti-corruption civil organizations because it was us supported by other NGOs and civil society organizations who pressed the political establishment to implement the reforms. And now our favorite president plays the arbiter role. I know that he was pressed by international community to fix the situation because it contradicts both current internal situation and international conventions. So the president plays the role of arbiters and in this role, he filed two bills which create other new obligations for us. I'm not going to go into details. The tax financial reporting was mentioned. We are reporting financially, we are reporting operationally, and we do that in much better shape. If any tax body would like to check our activities, they could easily do that. And we have tons of pro-Russian separatist organization, and they are not being checked. Nobody cares about them, but they somehow care seriously about anti-corruption organization. As to secondly, unproportioned sanctions, I have nothing to add to my colleagues. It's nonsense. If a mistake, small mistakes, leads to a cancellation of NGO status, it's unacceptable. Thirdly, it's about private entrepreneurships who are funded by international donors community. So if you make a mistake, you just move to the different groups, and we understand that governmental that tax service of Ukraine, which is led by not the most honest representatives of the society, and the criminal procedures are being waged against them. We understand that those are going to discriminate the most active anti-corruption organizations. But we do agree that transparency level should be increased, and we should have the consolidated position on that. Concerning on improvement of the transparency, however, what we hear from presidential administration prevents us from participation. So I'm sorry we are a little bit lagging behind. That is why let's make it quicker. Currently a lot of violations are excused by the war. However, there are a lot of humanitarian organizations doing very important jobs, and those humanitarian organizations are represented here. The word is given to Tamila Tasheva, the representative of Crimea SOS organization. So the very important thing is that we are ready to report, and what we are doing that monthly, annually, and all that. Therefore, additional load does not comply with the new norms which are discussed even by the representatives of the presidential administration. That is why we as a civil organization, as NGO, we are not funded by Ukrainian government. Therefore, if we say that international NGO, American or European NGO report publicly, they report publicly on governmental funds. We are not funded governmentally. That makes us very different, and those differences not mentioned. Secondly, I would like to agree with all my colleagues on sanctions. First of all, the cancellation of NGO status. We as an organization which provides financial support to our recipients, especially to those who live in Crimea or internally moved people, and if we report on that, people would pay the personal income tax, which is very dangerous. And I would like to mention about the adequacy of the data which we are now submitting. Those are mostly data which we submit, and no aim of the expenditure is meant. When we publicize that information, our society could not quite understand that. We have a lot of social workers and lawyers working there, and those people directly support people. They do not give financial support, but they support by advice and consultations. And when people, general public, see the salary report, they cannot understand what those people are doing. They cannot understand that a lawyer consults. It's not just for having those position's sake. And secondly, I would like to mention about private entrepreneurs discrimination, and it's not only the discrimination of our employees, because we work on the labor contract, under labor contracts, or different types of contracts, but I'm talking about supplies like cartridges or word supplies, and we sometimes in this situation find ourselves in the situation when we are going to be deprived of such a support. And I think we need to control, to monitor the technical and financial support given to our governmental agencies. Here is the information as for the 2016-17. There were 70 projects, and the value was $3 million US. However, the Ukrainian government does not report on those funds, but funding spent on civil society organization and funding of the unprotected citizens should be reported. If we refer to the international experience, EU experience, OSCE organization practice, is the inadequacy. EU always discusses adequacy of those actions. However, those are not adequate. The actions are not adequate, and thanks to the representative of the EU for talking about this position. And I would like to mention that we are working with the very vulnerable categories of people. Those are either internally moved persons, or they are living in the occupied territories, and the new regime will very badly influence those people. Within the last 3 years, we have been discussing the security of our government, but we forget about the adequate, about the proportion of the human rights and government security. I hope that all those new projects, well, if we recollect all the bills, most of the bills are very discriminative towards citizens, and the floor is given to Oleksandra Dvoretska, to Vostok SOS organization. Probably you have different opinion or whatever. So hello. I like to be the last one to discuss the bills, because I don't need to do technicalities. I previously hoped that I would never ever feel that NGOs are of the society. However, the situation changed compared to 2014. I remember that the bills with our pictures were all around Simferopol, and we had special anti-activist campaign. And I hope that the new government was going to meet the Maidan's requirement, and in particular in strengthening of the civil society, that civil society should take the monopolized functions, should meet social public sentiment and social request. We in fact created the army. The volunteers made that. Volunteers unity and activity helped to assist the internal moved persons. In particular, Vostok SOS did that. We tried to keep all the information about the crimes of the previous government and governmental authorities. And we see the sort of a retreat, and we're not sure that our government is sincere in their fight against the evils. They do not fight directly against us, but rather limit our opportunities to act and develop. It's more than just financial reporting. It's more looks like Crimean referendums. So you can do it either that way, or only anti-corruption organizations are going to report, or all organizations are going to be submitted to special reporting. It's a choice between that and worse. And I cannot understand why regulations of the financial organization reporting regulations are discussed with anybody but us. Why presidential administration cannot invite us for discussion? So we have a lot of opportunities and possibilities stipulated by our legislation. But what we see now is that social organizations and volunteers have more influence than presidential administration and SBU and all the governmental agencies have altogether. And I see that media and social organization is more influential for in the opinion of Ukrainian society, and it's dangerous. And I'm thinking what we're going to fight if government and social society would fight. I think it would be a very dangerous place to live. I would like the government to remember that they might need our assistance, and we see that the frontline situation worsens, and we don't know what's going on to be soon, and we'd better join our efforts and not to revenge on each other. We have more or less transparent regime, and we should start So I would like to answer your question. The situation worsens for us because we render assistance to the frontline organization. We have to supply the food there, and it's difficult to find entrepreneurs who are going to supply food for us. If it cooperation with NGOs means problems for them, they will stop that. And we are going to have very limited number of scenarios. Either like in Belarus, it is going to be black money only, or international organizations are going to be to enter Ukraine, and most of money will be circulating in those countries rather than in Ukraine. And when they leave Ukraine, we're not going to have neither NGO nor infrastructure for civil society activities. Thank you. well, now I understand that I have a pen produced, manufactured by private entrepreneurs. The paper is supplied by private entrepreneurs. So activities is next to impossible for us. And I would like to give a floor to a representative of Amnesty International Organization. Please make it very briefly. I understand that civil rights cannot be covered quickly, but still. So the bill which we're discussing now and the adoption of those bills is part of the much bigger trend to limit the freedoms of citizens. Everything started on propaganda ban bills, then ban on certain internet resources, followed by the bills on in censoring the internet. So we see that we have systematic attack on civil society, and they are trying to limit both the activity and territory for activities of those civil society organizations. Unfortunately, that's a regional trend. We have the Russia's example where those laws is in operation, and we can see the results of that. We see Hungarian example, we can Poland and Turkey experience should also be taken into account. They try to establish authoritarian regimes and limit citizens' freedom. So our government reacts positively to international influences, and if we are surrounded by the regimes which are limiting the freedom of citizens and civil society, then the situation gets dangerous. So hopefully we have time to discuss that, to develop the consolidated position, and we need to prevent adoption of those bills and to prevent the limitations to the extent Russia has it. Unfortunately, we have more. Unfortunately, we broke the time limit, so you can discuss the issues with the representatives privately, and we are going to start our second panel. Maria Haleti from international from the USAID project, Mr. Oleksandr Sushko from Renaissance Foundation, then Svetlana Zalishuk, Mustafa Naiem, who are members of parliament, and Daria Sidorenko, advocacy manager from the USAID project. So the floor is given to Mustafa Naiem? No, fine. So we are going to discuss international experience, international trends, rather than Ukrainian situation. So Maria Haleti is invited to talk the practice of the financial reporting of the governmental organizations. Thank you. I would like to start with letting you know that right after the bills were publicized, we addressed the Commercial Law Center to review those bills against international legislation. So the review showed that additional reporting has no grounds at all. It means that additional, when those additional reporting was offered, no explanation why the additional reporting is necessary was mentioned. No reasons for introduction of the new requirements towards transparency of the international organization. If there are any reasons for that, the reasons should be analyzed first and removed. So Secondly, the requirements are discriminative. Only representatives of NGOs must report, and it is very different from reporting of the other tax subjects, and it's also a violation of the constitution. Secondly, then the NGOs have to report in accordance with their size and their activities, but mostly with their size. Moreover, the government shall not require accountability and transparency, but should encourage to the transparency. If they insist on that, it's interference with their activity, and it's a violation of their freedom of civil activities. If we look at the similar documents, there is one in the US similar to that. However, it refers only to the charity organizations, and leadership should not report on whether their leadership is represented on other organizations. But if we refer to the best European practices, and if we are aiming at EU membership and vector, for example, French NGOs have much simpler reporting system. Only those organizations funded at more than 1,500,000 euros should report. Only governmental funded organizations should report. Polish system is more strict than French one. However, very easy compared to Ukrainian. They submit only one report, and they can publish their program report on their site. The same situation in Bulgaria. They also should report. However, that report is very different from the Ukrainian reports. Ukrainian, the practice which are supposed to be improved does not comply with European standards. Those organizations in Hungary, the organizations funded by the international donors community should report, but EU is going to sue Hungarian government. So we have one more speaker, the representative of the EU mission. He is a senior advisor on anti-corruption activities. Our next speaker represents the organization which influences Ukrainian future. It started from the support by grants from Renaissance Foundation. What do you think? Whether the donors' support is needed, and how the government should require the reporting. So I don't like requirements is the right word. The rules is better. The government should establish the even ground for everybody, and we has the right to participate in development of those rules for that even ground, in order to prevent the mistakes which needs to be fixed. That is why we have time to before the months before the session to analyze, to make the comprehensive analysis of that bills, and together with members of parliaments, with other participants of the process to develop the consolidated position. We do not think that we should reject reporting. We need the reporting. the NGOs should report, and that is supported by the experience of Renaissance Foundation. And we introduced the requirement to all the applicants, not even grant receivers, but applicants to our support, to publicize the reporting. So our grantees are not surprised at publicizing their annual report. But if we're talking about this, if we're discussing the details, then we see the problems, and we see that those small details change the situation dramatically. When we saw the presidential bills, we were even happy, because we know that civil society is put under the unfair conditions. Some of them are funded by international community, and they are transparent, they publicize their expenses, their costs, and all that. On the other hand, the organizations funded by the government and funded handsomely, we mean organizations like trade union, veterans organizations, and alike, they do not report publicly. We have no idea on what they are doing. And all those organizations, they must report. So I think that it's a right decision to make them report like we do. On the other hand, we see, well, there are a lot of legal technicalities, and I'm sure that lawyers are very close to finalizing their legal opinion. We see discrimination. If a government says that we require this instead of, for example, instead of NGO status, however, non-for-profit status is not similar to NGO. There are NGOs which are non-for-profit, and there are organizations which do not have this not-for-profit status. So let's not connect let's not mix the NGO with non-for-profit organizations, and let's make the profits, the reporting make that adequate with NGO and non-for-profit status. Then let's remove extra requirements. If we're talking about salaries reporting, it's redundant. Neither business nor neither private nor public sector report on their salaries. It's sort of ridiculous. This provision should be reprocessed, and private entrepreneurs, we think that it's discriminative. It needs to be amended. Overall, I understand that, well, let's confess, the trend is towards more transparency. If they say that the conditions are worsening, well, to a certain extent it is. However, the trend, the logics of the development leads to better transparency. Whether we are talking about media transparency or beneficiary transparency, well, should the civil society be exempt of that? No. I would say it's a trend to be accepted. But we need to help the government to find the best models for transparency, and I think that within a month the most reputable NGOs developed the consolidated position. Thank you. I would like to change the course of what's going on. I would like to ask Dvoretska, the taxation expert, and she will talk about the reporting and sanctions. I would like to say that those bills is not about transparency. There are a lot of organizations, as it was mentioned, funded by the government, and they are not covered by those organizations. And legislators do not understand the requirements towards government NGOs reporting. A lot of information required is presented in different other reporting. For example, non-for-profit reports, which is to be submitted by the 31st of March, and you can see how much money was received and spent. Another format is 1DF, it's salary report form. And then the question of transparency arises. But why NGOs? Why only those which received 300 minimum wages? Why other factors are not taken into consideration? I would also like to mention the new decree by the Cabinet of Ministers, which regulate the governmental funding. However, after those spending of those funds, the requirements is there that those funding and expenses should be publicized. The liability is for non-publicizing, and it's difficult to decide which site is chosen, selected for uploading. If not, then the litigation starts, and the litigation expenses could be unlimited, and those expenses are not reimbursed, and in fact it's impediments on NGOs' activities, and it's not the solution of the transparency problem. So far we have 15 reports and thousands in fines. So the floor is given to Svetlana Zalishuk. The question is why the authorities don't like the civil society. First of all, let me ask the civil society and donors community which analyzed the risks. So but first we need to ask ourselves why at all, and why we understand the reasons for introduction of those legislation, we would understand the problem. So it's not the technical mistake. It's not because the experts, the developers of this legislation made that by mistake. And I thought it was done on purpose. And that's the sign of the new stage of government and civil society activities. During the previous government, we were enemies. During Maidan, we had chances to become partners, and there were signs of partnership. But this new stage is sort of rivalry. And such a rivalry, such argument is the reason for development of such legislation. Earlier we were State Department agents, but nowadays we are competitors. Our government, right after Maidan, together with the civil society, created the new conditions for the NGOs and civil society. NGOs and civil society assumed the new roles. They got the decision-making powers. For example, NGO has a lot of powers, and national anti-bribery, anti-corruption agency, and election and assignment of the anti-corruption prosecutors. So the role of the NGOs is very important there, and they in fact regulated governmental powers and decision-making authorities in that respect, and that makes the government vulnerable, or they feel so, and that's an attempt to limit the influence of the civil society and NGOs activities. And secondly, I would like to mention, so 3 items to be mentioned. Secondly, that's about civil society. We should analyze what's going on in NGOs. So those who are here is a very limited number of people. We know each other, but the civil society is much larger than our pretty limited circle, and there are a lot of a lot of them have a lot of tools. For example, NGOs established by corporate sector. For example, when the National Anti-Corruption Agency was established, there was a public competition. Transparency International sued Arseniy Yatsenyuk, and they won the case because the NGOs were quasi-NGOs. So we are not dealing with Crimea SOS or Donbass SOS. We have a lot of other NGOs, and because of their lack of transparency, other NGOs are suffering, and we should take these contradiction into account. On one hand, we have one type of NGOs. On the other hand, we have NGOs which require increase of transparency, and thus will promote civil society activities. And thirdly, what can be done? The bill is registered there, and we have that shift of relationship, and we have the situation of the very diverse civil society. A lot of those organizations compromise the civil society activities. First of all, we need to restore trust between and understanding between society and government. And I would like to ask you, NGOs, why not do the say round table and invite the president and all faction heads and make them hear what you say. I know it's general practice when the NGO or media invite government and legislators, and they are accountable, and I think that NGOs should take initiative to do that. And with the role the NGOs are playing now, the representatives of government and legislators will come to that event. And secondly, we need a comprehensive concept of how we are going to solve the problem. We need to review and prepare the legislation. It's more than just one bill. How we can improve the NGOs' activities. We are against the current legislation, but is not enough. we need to be strong, and we need, if we want to show our position to the society, we need to say what the solution rather than what needs to be done. We should offer the solutions. We should offer the solution which to be introduced into the bills, and this solution should be supported by all the donors and NGOs community. And then at the operational level, we need to do something about the current law on e-declaration. It covers a lot of people who have no idea that they have additional obligations because of that. Mr. Lemenov introduced changes to his information on his property, but a lot of people have no idea that they have to change their reporting, and we will have a lot of violators who have no idea that they're violators. We need to deal with that in autumn. Thank you. The floor is given to Mr. Mustafa Nayam.
So here is the question. Taking into account your experience as a journalist, as a person who is searching who is who, how do you think why the government makes its decision behind the closed door? Why isn't it made in a discussion with civil society, and what we can do to change that? Thank you. I would like to start by such a statement. Let's resist those manipulations that we faced. Let's just remember what we started with. It started from a presidential bill that was aimed to make easier life for a serviceman, for their reporting. Then we have some amendments from Народный Front faction, and they appear these provisions about anti-corruption NGOs. I know very well that it was discussed in the Cabinet of Ministers, and it was the initiative of the Народный Front faction, and from the very beginning this initiative started for that. And I would like to remind you once again, everyone who has a good idea, let's resist those manipulations. This is an attempt to revenge to the civil society. It was clearly said how to do that. Then the president had to take into account the opinion of Western partners of Ukraine. I know very well that we had this remark that there will be no EU summit if these amendments will be introduced. And the presidential administration had to protect its reputation. And in order to resist that, to save face, they started discussion about this draft law. So this draft law is not the result of an expert work. It's not a result of a discussion with civil society. It's just an attempt of the presidential administration to save its face. There were no technical work here. Just let's remind how many meetings with NGOs we had when we worked on this draft law. What expert recommendations were taken into account? There were no such work at all. For 3 or 4 months, I have been writing addresses to the presidential administration with a proposition to join this work. But I was invited only for a presentation. And this shows their attitude to the civil society. So once again, the main aim of this draft law is a revenge to the civil society. And now the presidential administration just tries to save their face, to save their good reputation. It is not an attempt to make life easier for the civil society, not at all. And we must understand that. The second point, if we look at the level of trust to the civil society and the trust to the state, we can see an enormous gap there. And we can see an enormous decrease of trust to the state. While NGOs do a lot of work that should have been done by the state, by the authorities, the state tries to change the rules of game for the civil society. And we will give up our values if we will not resist that. We try to choose between bad and very bad. And this is not the way out of the situation. This is our civil society. We do not receive money from the state budget. And those who receive, let's make them report. The civil society reports enough to prove its transparency. Will it help to prevent fake NGOs from appearing? Not at all. And if an NGO will provide a report, a state-funded NGO, that it implemented a project for improving democracy in the Luhansk region, they will not prove that. They will not prove how they did it. They can write anything there that they contribute to the transparency and to the democracy in the society and so on. This law has just one aim. It is a mechanism for pressure on the civil society. It is a mechanism for pressure and revenge. And once again, let me remind, this draft law was prepared by Mr. Shimkiv. And let's just imagine that this is not Mr. Shimkiv, but Ms. Lukash, who was working with the party of regions. This law paves the way to Yanukovych times, to Boyko times, to Tymoshenko times. Let's imagine other faces in our governmental institutions. This law will be used against the civil society. What about the status of non-profit organization? Just let me remind you that almost can we imagine any country that the authority in any country makes a decision about the status of non-profit organization being given or removed? This should be decided by the court. So what should we do with that? This draft law, this is not our game. This is the game of the presidential administration. Let them do what they are doing. I will not submit any alternative draft law. First of all, we have no time for that. Secondly, we should not give an alternative to something that is completely wrong from the very beginning. So, okay, thank you. I hope there will be a day when we will be able to thank the authorities that they removed these strange provisions from the draft law. And the rules of game, how the civil society must report, should be developed by the experts from the civil society. And I agree with Svetlana that we need to unite our efforts and to offer the rules of game based on best practices, international best practices, that will contribute to our transparency. We know the NGOs know their problems of transparency better than Mr. Shimkiv or other officials. How they can know that one person may be working for 6 projects and have a bigger salary than a director of very big projects? We know that there are technical details and sometimes controversial details, but anyway, these rules must be developed by the civil society, and I hope that in the autumn we will see an initiative from the civil society and we will lobby and promote that idea. So I'll call you not to be naive and to resist this instrument, and not to thank the presidential administration for some steps back.
The floor is given Mr. Yegor Sobolev, the head of Anti-Corruption Committee of Verkhovna Rada, the hottest committee probably, where a lot of discussion is going there. So your committee is responsible for the transparency, for accountability of all the Ukrainian society. From your viewpoint, do civil societies need more accountability and transparency, or the government needs that? Shortly, yes. I'm a appreciate what I've heard from Oleksandr, what they think. He is a representative of a big organization with the experience of civil society or development. The day before the final voting, I was addressed by the parliament leadership to prepare this bill for voting itself, and you know, our committee is responsible for the review of this bill. However, I refuse to do that without the discussion with wide circle of those who are going to be regulated by this law. Although we have experience working in NGO, we have the idea of who is who there, but it should be a consolidated and agreed decision of the NGOs. I think that it's a very positive that we're having this discussion now, and our joint obligation to develop good bill by September. The idea that a bad government wants to regulate me poorly is a victim's approach. So here I would like to remind you, many of you are my old friends, all the changes which were adopted previously were adopted either due to the NGOs and civil society or differently. Whether we are talking about public servants reporting, the transparency and publicizing of the property registers, voting registry. So that is why I think that all NGOs should develop the regulation framework for their activities. When we were NGOs, we developed the when we worked in media, we developed our regulatory framework, and it was our initiative, and it's only natural that NGOs should develop their regulatory framework. I would like to ask probably Renaissance Foundation and other initiators of the discussion to take a lead, to lead the discussion, to bring together the opinion leaders, the experts from the NGOs, and develop the bill. I agree with everything which was said. However, I think that the methods which are employed by the presidential administration is more than just a revenge technology or method. It's like making even conditions. You know, any member of parliament, when they are reproached, when they are pressed to publicizing their reports, they say that, oh, have a look at have a look at Ligachova. They don't want to report about their properties, and unfortunately they use these pretexts, and it's in our best interest to show that we are not all the same, and there are NGOs which started reporting, organizations which understand that they should report on their funding sources, funders, and how they expand. They're going to support the reporting initiative, and it's in the best interest of the civil society. On the other hand, we have the problem of the occupied territories, where the activities of the civil society organizations is facing serious threat by FSB and other dangers, and additional reporting will create additional jeopardy. And still, who should we report to? First of all, we need to report to the civil society, to civil people. Probably it should be a special site to avoid the problem of domain registration. Whatever, we need to develop, to join our efforts and develop the bill. So our committee is at your service. We're going to regulate bills as the legislative techniques are going to be channeled through Yuzhanina committee, but mostly it will be channeled through our committee. So you are welcome. What we need to explain to general public that we need that. You know, one thing is 1/3 is the legislative efforts, 1/3 is voting, and 1/3 is explaining, because we have Denisenko syndrome, when at the last moment the representative of any political power comes and suggests adopting something else. So our good initiative could be turned against us. And then the president can say, well, that's the government offer, the parliament offer, so I'm signing it. It's not enough to develop good legislation. It's critical to make it publicly. Thus, we can exclude participation of those who are going to say, I didn't have a chance to get acquainted with that, and that is why I'm against. Thank you very much. That's it. And Mr. Clemens, the floor is yours. He is the senior advisor on anti-corruption activities from EU.
The discussion, it's very interesting to listen to, and I would just start to reflecting maybe how the situation evolved. And first of all, there was a milestone achievement for Ukraine last year by having introduced the ES declaration system, and we should not forget that. But then instead of reaching the next level, which is effective and objective verification of those asset declarations, we have actually seen a rollback, and I would even call it a distraction, by the amendments which were introduced to the law on prevention of corruption, including the NGOs in the asset declaration system. Those amendments are nonsensical and also internationally unprecedented. It's clear that NGOs are not public officials. They don't exercise state functions. So introducing them into the asset declaration system blurs the lines of responsibilities and distinct categories. The EU Anti-Corruption Initiative, we have requested a lengthy research paper on that, which will be soon also available in Ukraine. And it clearly comes also to the conclusion it is unrepresented to have NGOs included in the asset declaration system. So, but then instead of simply revoking these amendments, now this discussion is about increasing transparency standards for NGOs, which I think is not necessarily linked or intertwined. And yes, speaking about transparency standards in Ukraine, it is very important, but the question is transparency for CSOs currently of main concern? And the Venice Commission, in a recent statement giving towards the law which was adopted in Hungary, partially criticizing the law, has stressed that transparency itself may justify proportionate reporting and disclosure obligations on NGOs. But
sorry, Mr. Kalmas, just 30 seconds, okay?
Yeah. But it's also clear that this reporting obligation cannot be excessive. And here we have to see whether the current draft laws which were introduced are the right one. And again, concerns have been raised already towards the legitimate and necessity, and also about the disproportionality and about the inclusiveness. And there it's basically nothing about us without us. And there's a clear recommendation from the Council of Europe which has to be followed. Okay. So I would just conclude by saying a strong and independent civil society is a pillar of good governance and essential component of anti-corruption efforts. Anti-corruption NGOs and other NGOs, they have played a very important role in facilitating the reform process of Ukraine, and they continue to do so.
Okay, thank you. Я перепрошую, ми маємо поступитись місцем наступним виступаючим, які займають в цьому залі. Я буквально дуже там за 10 секунд підсумую. Ті основні ідеї, які були озвучені, це те, що нам необхідно самостійно громадян.
I'd like to sum up the main ideas. First of all, to develop the civil society must develop their position and develop the legislative framework, and we need to establish platform for development of such legislation. In that way, I would like to finish our roundtable discussion, and the floor is given to our next to the next participants. Thank you very much to UCMC.